Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Religion Unplugged podcast, your one stop shop for all the best religious news and culture. My name is Joseph Holmes, a chief film and culture critic of Religion Unplugged. And today I am here with Mike Flynt. Mike Flynt is the real life inspiration behind the new Angel Studios feature film in theaters September 19th, The Senior. The film follows how at 59, Flynt went back to college and made history as the oldest starting linebacker in NCAA football. He is a sought after motivational speaker, sharing his message of redemption, faith, and perseverance with schools, churches, corporations, and athletic teams nationwide. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. I was just telling you beforehand, I just saw a movie yesterday, so it's really cool to be able to talk to you in person.
Well, again, I'm honored that you would have me, and I look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So let's get started there. Tell me a bit more about your story. How did you end up going back to college football at the age of 59?
Well, it was totally unorchestrated. It was nothing that I had planned and sit down and put together the thoughts about. Hey, I'll wait until this point in time and then go do this. Now, that it nothing like that. I was kicked out of Sul Ross State University. Sul is short for Sullivan. Sullivan Ross was a former governor in the state of Texas. So Sul Ross State University down in Southwest Texas, about 100 miles from the Mexican border. My senior year in high school, we won state championship at Permian High School that started that winning tradition that inspired the book and the subsequent movie Friday Night Lights. I was a very good football player. When I was young, I received multiple all full scholarship offers to play football at different universities, but I ended up down at Sul Ross. Going into my senior year, I was an all conference linebacker. I was team captain, and I got into a fight one night over curfew. The coaches, as team captain, had appointed me to make sure the players were in at curfew. We were in two-a-days. A couple of freshmen weren't in. One of them took exception to me telling him when he could and couldn't come and go. And it got physical and he got hurt. The president of the college was called the next morning. The head coach had me in his office and he told me, he said, Mike, Dr. McNeil has called me and told me he's heard Mike Flynt's name for the last time. I had been in multiple fights over a 2 year time period. I was a good person, but I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was a trouble seeker. If I felt like one of my friends or someone was being bullied, I'd step in a heartbeat. I didn't mind fighting, and it had all so much to do with the way I had been raised by my father, who was a World War II veteran, D-Day, Battle of the Bulge. He ended up losing a leg from the Battle of the Bulge, and but he brought that military mindset to training me when I was young. The head coach told me, he said that he didn't have any choice. I was kicked out of school, lost my senior year, and I went on with my life. I went into the fitness business, met a beautiful young co-ed that I fell in love with. We got married. It's almost 53 years ago now, but she changed my whole life, led me to faith in Christ. I became a strength and conditioning coach at the University of Nebraska, University of Oregon, Texas A&M, and I always had a philosophy about my coaching, and I never asked one of my athletes to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. And so I stayed in great shape, helping other athletes get in shape. And I resigned from coaching years ago, but losing my senior year, that team that I was kicked off of, we had gone 8-3 the year before. We had everybody back. We were picked to win the Lone Star Conference. I was their team captain. They would play for me. They went 4-6-1 after I was kicked out. And I knew that had I been there, it had been different, and that we would have possibly won that conference. And so I internalized that. I didn't share it with anybody, but I grieved over it for 37 years. And then through happenstance, I I found out that I still had a semester of eligibility left, and I met with the head coach, convinced him to give me a shot at walking on to the team as a linebacker. And I told him, he asked me why, I would come back and do that. And I told him that, you know, I knew that there was nothing I can do about those guys that I let down all those years ago. But I felt like if I could come back as a linebacker and make the team, I could help a bunch of young men that I didn't even know, but for me, it made up for those guys that I let down. And so I just needed a chance to try. And so he gave me a shot. And, by the grace of God, all those years that I had continued to run sprints, continued to train, when the coach tells you at 59 that he's going to give you a chance to make it through two-a-days, if you're not ready, you're not going to get ready at 59. But I was ready. I've said so many times that not every journey has to have a destination. You just go. You just have to take positive steps in a direction and trusting God to refine that, lead you where it is that you need to go. But go, move, do something. So I was able to do that, and so that's how it all started.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's how you got to where you were in that decision. Did you expect the kind of media attention that you got, when the news came out that, oh, you is somebody who's 59 is playing college football?
Yeah, absolutely not. In fact, I announced our pastor, he just, he flipped out when I told him. I said, "Look, I'm going back to Texas," because we were living here in Tennessee, and I said, I'm moving back to Texas. I just want you to know why I'm leaving the church." And he said, "What is it you're going to be doing?" And I told him. He said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "You've got to announce this to the congregation." And I thought, wow. And so I did. I couldn't get out of the church. I mean, people, wanting to talk to me, give me their phone number and all this. And I got home and I told Eileen, I said, you know, I, what is it that all these people are going nuts about an old man going back to play college football? I don't understand it. I had no earthly idea that it was going to be um, received in the manner that it was. And therein, the location of Sul Ross really was a positive thing for me because it's not the easiest place on the planet to get to. And so but they did. They finally, the media came, and it was overwhelming. Yeah, it was crazy.
So I want to ask a question about two people's reactions to this specifically. One is the movie definitely dramatizes as a big part of the story your family's very mixed reactions to the idea of you going back at your age to play college football. And so I was interested in like what was their reaction like, to this idea and how easy was it to get them on board to it? And then secondly, why do you think that it people did once you did announce it more widely, people had such a powerful response to your story?
Well, for my family, the first part of the question or the first question, Eileen, she was our youngest daughter has just graduated from high school and she's going to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Our two older children are married, they're gone from home. So we're going to be empty nesters. And so we had decided, we'll downsize and, sell our house. We had a lot of equity and we'd move, someplace smaller. So Eileen is really involved in that. She's we put our house on the market and we had a contract almost immediately. So we got to be out in 30 days, and she's busy with that. She's working on orientation for Lily in college. She's ignoring me. You know, she's thinking, well, the NCAA is going to tell him there's no way he has eligibility, or he's going to get down there and talk to that head coach and he's going to laugh him out of his office. And so I come back from Alpine and meeting with the head coach, and Eileen, she's got a list of houses for us to go look at. And I said, Eileen, I said, coach is coach is going to give me a chance to make the team. I said, we're going back to college. we're going back to Texas. And she looked at me and she said, I cannot believe at 59 years old that you want to go back and try to play college football. She said, I feel like I'm married to Peter Pan. And then it hit me. I had never shared it with her. I, she had no idea. And I set her down and I said, Eileen, look, I've lived over half my life with a regret over a mistake that I made. And coach is going to give me a chance to rewrite that last chapter in my athletic career. And I've got to try. I said, to have the chance and not try, I said, I don't know that I'm going to make the team. I may not even make the team, but I've got to try because it'd be worse than getting kicked out the first time to live the rest of my life wondering, what if I could have made that team? I've got to go try. And she said, well, I had no idea. She said, I know if the shoe was on the other foot, you'd do it for me. So let's go play football. Then, our children, it was all over the board. My oldest daughter has always been my greatest cheerleader, and she just said, "Wow, Dad, go go." Our youngest daughter, kind of middle of the road, and our son was he just said this is nuts. What are you thinking about? But he came around as well. But my whole family was behind me, and it was just their complete total support. And so what? And now tell me the other question that
The other question was, why do you think that this story has resonated with so many people? Like you said, your pastor said you have to tell people about this, and then people
yeah
wouldn't,
yeah
let you out of the church. And then of course the media attention around it, people obviously it's turned into an inspirational story.
yeah
And it wasn't something you expected. So as you've seen these conversations, it what have you understood and grown to understand has been what's made it resonate with so many people.
well, I think it's multiple things. Number one, people in America don't realize how much like life the game of football is.
Mm.
I think from a subliminal standpoint, that's one of the reasons that people love football as much as they do. I mean, there are so many parallels in the game of football and in life. And everyone loves that impossible underdog story. And my motive, there was nothing about it for me. I avoided the media. I did everything that I could to stay out of the limelight because that was not on my radar at all. There was not anything that I wanted or felt like would be beneficial. It was a distraction for me, but it was something that I finally had to embrace because I realized that, hey, this is going to be a good thing for my teammates and for my school. And so, I stepped into that, and but just people in general, and the positive things that came out of it initially were so encouraging to me. Because it did receive so much publicity, I would have people, mostly men, that would recognize me because they had seen me on TV, in the newspapers and on the internet, all of that stuff. They'd walk up to me. I'd be out someplace and they'd walk up to me and offer to shake hands and say, "Are you Mike?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm Mike." And we'd shake hands and I'd have to ask them their name. They'd tell me their age. they'd say, I'm 62 or I'm 57. And then they begin to start telling me about something that they were doing that they had given up on because I was coming back to play. And so it just had such a positive impact with in other people's lives that that was such an encouragement to me that there was something that I was doing chasing my dream that was helping somebody else to chase their dream. And so it was really gratifying and rewarding from that standpoint.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that is a a really strong piece of it is that we often are confronted with the limits of our lives a lot.
Yeah.
And certainly age is that ultimate limit that you can't stop it. It's going to, get there, but oftentimes when we see somebody who is able to overcome at least to some degree the limits that they have, it gives us inspiration that, oh, maybe my limits are not as severe as I thought, and I actually can go after this thing that I care about. So that
Yeah.
makes sense that that would be resonant and inspiring in that way.
Yeah, and a couple of different people, several different people would talk to me about how they started believing in themselves again because of what I was doing and the things that I was saying. And I realized that other people can have such a negative impact on your belief by the things that they say that they try to put you in to their category. And if there's something that you want to share that you're going to go and try to do, if it's something they can't do, they may try to talk you out of it simply because they can't do it. So they're thinking, well, there's no way that he can do this. I had when word got out, it went it went worldwide. I had letters being sent to the athletic department from Japan, but
Wow.
I had so many people call me that were encouraging and praying, and but then I had those letters come in. What about your knees? What about your shoulders? What are you going to do about your back? I didn't have any of those problems, but they did, and so they were trying to transfer their issues into my life. I had two different physicals before they'd let me put those pads on. And the second doctor that I went to, he said, "Man," he said, "you're in great shape." And he said, "Now I think you need to see a psychiatrist, but other than that, you're ready to go." And so I didn't have all those limitations. Other people did, and they were trying to, but my belief in myself and I felt like God given me the strength and the ability to do this enabled me to go forward.
Yeah, no, this is really good. I want to touch on a couple of things there, and which leads me to my next question, because I think you make an excellent point, which is that it's one thing to feel like I'm not going to get to do my dream. But one of the ways that we make peace with that is if we say, well, that's just the way the world is, and that's the way it's going to be for everyone.
Hmm.
And so it becomes more painful if we think, well, I'm not going to achieve my dream, but somebody else is going to achieve theirs. So it really has to do with me and not with the world. And so I think that there is a sense in which sometimes people do try to put other people down so they don't have to deal with the pain of being envious of somebody else on top of disappointed in themselves.
Right. Yeah.
But you did make this connection between, of course, this belief in this dream that you have and the belief in God that this was something that God wanted. And I think one of the things that is interesting, there's a reason that a lot of these faith-based or faith-adjacent films and Angel Studios is sort of a semi-faith-based or an inspiring light kind of inspirational company where they do a lot of faith-based projects.
Right.
There's a lot of the inspirational genre, so to speak, and the faith-based genre often go hand in hand because people do see a connection between believing in God and believing in, a more positive, inspiring outlook on life. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your own faith journey, because you do talk at the beginning of the movie when they, give you space to speak before the movie starts. And then also you talked about this interview, how you didn't start out being a Christian in your life, and your relationship and your faith grew over time. Can you talk a little bit about your faith journey and then the ways that intersected with the journey that's of football that's laid out in the movie?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the years ago, after I went back to play, and all of a sudden Hollywood got involved. A gentleman, that he was actually the CEO of K-Love radio stations at that time. He told me, he said, "This will be a movie one day." He said, "Your story is about daddy issues, and everybody has them." And in my case, my father, I never saw him in church, never heard him pray. And he was a very good man, but he had no relationship at all with Jesus. And so I was trained in that environment. And it wasn't until I met Eileen that, um, she laid down the law. She said our children are going to be raised in church. We're going to be a Christian family. And but for me, what that meant for me was that, yeah, I'm gonna go along with that. But I was so proud. I didn't need anyone dying for me, and so I went through the motions. But after we'd been married for 10 years, God knocked me to my knees, and something happened in my life that was life changing for me. And I'd reached a point. I was drinking a lot, and um, just one Monday, we lived on a golf course in Austin, Texas, and the golf course was closed. And I told Eileen, I said, the easiest thing for me, I think, is just take my pistol and go in that closet and get this over with. I can't stand this anymore. And with my violent past, she took it so serious, and she said, "Come on with me. We're going for a walk." And we walked down on that golf course, and she began to share. I had no idea the depth of her knowledge of Christ and of the Bible. And she was quoting the scripture to me and talking to me about how much that Christ loved me. And I had a sense, I didn't know for sure, but I just had a sense that everything was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay. Well, went back, I'd never read the Bible. I didn't know anything at all about God. I picked it up and I started trying to read the Bible, and it was like eating dry cereal. I'd think, what did I just read? And Eileen had bought a 16 volume set of children's Bible stories for our children. And they had pictures and all this stuff. And I took first one down and I read that and had all these pictures and there were all the explanations. I read all 16 uh, volumes, every one of them. And then I went back and picked up my Bible, and it totally made sense to me. And ended up making a profession of faith in Christ, and started my journey with Him, and it totally changed my whole life, because it gave me a completely different lens to see things through. And I had half of my life in violence and self and all of these different things. And then all of a sudden, then I recognize that the mistakes that I've been making, the need that I had to turn and go a different direction. And so there was, up until I was age 34, and then after age 34, were two different people. The man that was kicked out uh, of college in 1971 was so totally different from the man that went back to play in 2007. And that difference was apparent in the people that hadn't seen me in a long time. A guy, that friend of mine that's known me since I was 12, uh, told me, he said, "You are the most changed individual I have ever known." And it was Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me there is a lot of stories that kind of resemble yours that I hear, particularly of, this in the modern world, there's a lot of, we know that against, guess, since the 19th, 20th centuries, there's a lot more women, have gone to church, been enthusiastic about going to church than men, and men have this experience of, well, I've got to do everything myself, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how my life is going to be good, is if I make my life better. And a lot of men talk about they only will accept Christ once they come to the end of their rope and say, okay, well, my doing everything myself has gotten me this far, but it can't take me any farther.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it usually takes a good woman to be able to say, hey, you there is another way. You can actually accept help from somebody else, and divine help, and that changes your whole life. And so that's, I kind of have a different faith kind of journey story, but I find that that's a faith journey story that's so relevant and so powerful, and so it ends up in a lot of these faith-based films that I find really, really cool and really interesting. I do want to talk about sort of this, you talk about changed life, and you talk about these different aspects of this, and you've talked about how your one of the things you wanted to do when you were going back was to be a good influence on the and help to the other players who were college kids there, that you would be your
Yeah.
teammates. So talk to me a little bit about that, which is, how is, first of all, their reaction? This is dramatized a little bit in the movie, but their reaction to having a 59-year-old teammate, and then how some of those relationships developed in ways that you felt like you were able to be a benefit to the your teammates.
Well, the my teammates were it was all over the board. I mean, they they were just we were standing in line to get equipment. There's about 100 guys getting equipment, and this one guy kept looking over at me, and finally he walked over and he said, "So you gonna coach or what?" And I said, "No, man, I'm here to play." And he said, "To play? Now, how old are you?" And I said, "I'm 59." 59. Y'all got to come look at this guy. Well, that was my first informal introduction to the team. But when we put those pads on, like I said, I was a good football player when I was young, and I was blessed in that I never had any injuries, so I didn't have any baggage to take back with me, and I was in great shape. And the very first day of practice, the coach said, we got everything set up in circuit fashion. And it's 95 degrees outside. Like I said, we're 100 miles from the Mexican border. And we're in two-a-days. And he said, we got 6 stations in this circuit. We're going to find out what color your blood is. Is it yellow or is it red? And if we don't find out at station 1, by the time you get to station 6, we're going to know. Well, they were trying to run players off because they were just trying to get them to quit. They wanted to find out who wanted to play. And so I began to gain respect from my teammates because they knew it wasn't a publicity stunt. Because I still had a lot of abilities. I had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge about the game. And but I began to notice the attraction of certain players to me. And, one player came up and said, introduced himself and told me that um, uh, my dad, my dad played here with you when you were here back in the late 60s and early 70s. He said it's just an honor to be here, to be on this team with you. And another guy came to me and said that his dad was a pastor, and he said he had read wonderful things about Mike. And he told me, he said, you stay close to Mike, you hang out with Mike, and he'll help you. And then some of the guys that are actually going to be at the premiere that I've stayed in touch with them over the last 18 years since I went back to play. We've stayed in contact. I mean, but I was able to uh, bring to the table exactly what I asked God to enable me to do. I really wanted to help these young men. I wanted to, and not just football. I wanted to help them with life. And there was this one young man. His number is number 9 in the movie, Jeremy in the movie. But he was, had a very difficult situation that came up on campus that he was getting ready to quit school. And and he had told me when I first met him, I asked him what he was studying, and he said that he was an education major. He wanted to teach third grade. And I thought, wow, that's strange that he would designate a grade. I said, what's up about third grade? And he said, when I was in the third grade, I had a father figure for a teacher that helped me all through elementary school because I didn't have a father at home. And he said, I want to do that for other kids. He said, I want to be a teacher, elementary school teacher, and I want to start in the third grade. Well, he was getting ready to quit. Some things had happened, and I just grabbed him and I said, Jeremy, I said, what about all those kids? What about all those kids that don't even know that they need you, but they're going to need you? You can't quit. You can't walk away. And I said, you know, you not getting in a confrontation with those guys that belittled you and said the things that they did to you, I was never able to do that. It was always about Mike Flynt and a couple of minutes of self-satisfaction. I never thought about consequences. I never thought about how my decisions might impact so many people around us. I said, Jeremy, we've got to have you running back those kickoffs. We got to have you at wide receiver. The decision you made not to fight those guys was you may be an All-American one day because of that one right choice that you made. And I said, and those kids being able to go back and help those, I said, you can't quit. You've got to stay here and overcome this. And he stayed, received his degree, and became a third grade teacher in his hometown. And so it was that impact that I wanted to be able to make in those young men's lives. And I got to tell you this because it's not in the movie, but it's in the same vein of what I'm talking about right now. 26 of my former teammates came back for homecoming to watch me play. 26 coaches and teammates. And the president of the college had me be there early. He was going to introduce all those players, and then he was going to introduce me. And I was sitting around the side of the building. He wanted me to hide so because they didn't know I was going to be coming out. And I was listening over the PA system to all those names that I hadn't heard in almost 4 decades. And then he called out Mike Flynt, number 49, linebacker. And I started out on the field, and all those guys turned and started walking to meet me. And we met in the middle of the field, had a group hug. There were a lot of tears. One of them grabbed me and said, Mike, we keep reading where you said that you let us down all those years ago. We knew that fight wasn't your fault, and we never blamed you for that. And besides, look, because you came back to play, we're all back together again. So God in his mercy allowed me to receive the forgiveness that I needed from my former teammates to overcome that greatest regret in my life. And uh, and that was my whole reason for going back to play. And so it was amazing how God brought it full circle, and because he knew my heart and why I was there, and enabled me to receive what it is that I went back for.
That's amazing. So, if you were to have one thing that you'd want people to take away from your story and then also get to take away after seeing the movie, what would that be?
I, you know, for me, there are so many people that were like I was and had regrets in life that the thought of a second chance or going back and redoing, having a chance to redo something, but there's no way they can. And I knew there was no way that I could go back and change the past, but I felt like I could change the meaning of the past. If I could do something today, if I could do something by making that team and helping a bunch of young men that I didn't know, then I could make up for those guys that I let down so many years ago. I could substitute what it is that I was doing right now to change the meaning of that regret. And so that's something that everyone can do. They can find something good to substitute for that regret, that past problem or issue that's haunted them for so many years. Um, and do it now and do it. And it's all about your heart. It's all about what it is that you truly want to do to overcome that regret, and then go do it.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt. You can't change the past, but you can change the meaning of the past. That's really great. So if people obviously everybody, if this sounds like a great story to you, obviously it's going to be in theaters September 19th. So you can see that there. If people want to, again, you're a motivational speaker, you're doing things like if people want to get in touch with you and want you to maybe speak somewhere, where can they go to get in touch with you?
They can go to MikeFlynt.com, and it's Flynt, MikeFlynt.com.
Amazing.
Yeah, they
Thank
can
you
go
so
there.
much,
They can
sir.
go there and watch the trailer to the movie. It's there on the website.
Amazing. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, here for listening to us. And remember, this is Religion Unplugged, your one stop shop for all the best religious news and culture.